Hi folks, welcome to today's episode. Hopefully you listened to the last episode on confronting the wider influences of pain, as I'm going to be continuing from there and delving a bit deeper into that topic. So if you haven't checked that out, do that first and then continue to this episode. Now if you did listen to the last episode, you'll know that I was somewhat thinking out loud, and I acknowledged that so far I'm only really dipping my toes into these ideas. So I need a bit of time to consider them more deeply and sort of verbalize them, and the act of creating these podcasts and writing about it is a process of consolidating my ideas. So the idea that I'm referring to in a nutshell is that the way that we treat back pain, and pretty much all pain for that matter, is extremely short-sighted. And what I mean is that even those who claim to be holistic and who claim to consider the whole person, these people are missing so much of the bigger picture, and I include myself in that, by the way. I'm not here sitting on my high horse pointing out all the flaws in other therapists and thinking I'm perfect. I'm acknowledging that the model is broken. The way we treat back pain, the way we treat most pain is broken. Like if you just go to your doctor, or even if you go to a good physio, I think that model is broken, and I personally no longer want to be a part of propagating that model. I want to I want to elevate the way we treat pain. I want to make people's lives better, and I think this is the motivation for most good therapists, at least to some extent, and it's that you see the pain that others feel, and perhaps you've felt it yourself. That was certainly my experience, and you want to get rid of it, or you want to minimize the pain that others are experiencing. You want to get rid of needless suffering. Needless suffering is a key distinction, because a certain amount of suffering is inevitable and likely necessary. And in a sense, you can say that you want to make the world a better place. By reducing needless suffering, we make the world a better place. It's that simple. We allow people to live more comfortable lives and to fulfill their goals and their ambitions. And I don't say this to sort of make therapists and make myself sound divine or superhuman or anything like this. I say this to make the ultimate goal clear. It boils down to making the world a better place, or at the very least making one person's world and their life better. So for me, a logical next step is to be looking for anything and everything that could possibly lead to pain in an individual. So if it's my job to help someone in pain and they come to me expecting me to be able to help them, then it's my duty to know, or at least be aware of everything I could possibly know about pain, to have a grasp of all the relevant factors in someone's life that may be contributing to their pain. And I'll use my personal journey of overcoming my own pain and becoming a therapist to make my point clearer. So I went to college, and the name of the game was to find imbalance in the structure. To find areas that were tight and to release them, to strengthen weak areas, to align things, to align the bones and the joints. So that was the name of the game. And a typical treatment then involved a postural assessment and then a hands-on assessment of the physical structure of the person. And when I'd find something that was short and tight, then it was my job to release it, so to speak. To find knots, quote knots, to find trigger points and to remove them, so to speak. And in my mind, I was getting rid of the problem by doing this. But the reality was that people might, after a treatment, they might walk out slightly looser, perhaps standing up straighter and with some pain relief, or perhaps complete pain relief, but they would generally walk back in the exact same way as they had walked in at the start of their first session. And so when this happens repeatedly, and you have any degree of moral conscience and a desire for the truth, you realize that something is missing. Something of greater influence is happening to undo the work that I've done. And I'm going to fast forward through the sort of next stages, as they're simply a repetition of the same thing. But what happened to me, and what happens to most therapists, is they look for the missing piece of the puzzle. You know, they look for that one thing that they're missing that's going to solve the problems that keep coming back. And in searching for this, they'll come across countless numbers of modalities that claim to hold that missing piece of the puzzle. So they look for courses, and there's tons and tons of courses that claim to have the solution, that claim to have the patented secret solution to the problem. And these courses will obviously promote themselves and to get people to sign up. And so the promotional contents of these courses invariably say things along the lines of, are you tired of adjustments and releases not sticking? Are you wondering why your patients walk back into your clinic with the exact same problem and all of your work undone? It's because you're not addressing blank. You know, insert a random secret factor that most people ignore or don't understand. That's what they'll tell you. And then they'll tell you that because of the supreme importance of that secret factor, none of your treatments will work unless you learn what they have to teach you. This is an exaggeration, but this is the general pattern. They're trying to find that one thing that you don't know about, that you're missing, that is plausibly the missing link in your treatment protocol. And while I'm not discounting the value of some of these courses, as I actually know plenty that are highly effective, and I've studied many, and I continue to use many, and I've discarded others. The issue with this is that the courses often zoom in on one piece of the puzzle. You know, they'll zoom in on the thing that they know and that they can sell you. And it could be almost anything. I really can't stress this enough. It could be a course about the importance of the foot, or about the foot biomechanics. It could be about the pelvis, the importance of the pelvis, or about the jaw, for example, or about the brain and the importance of the brain, or about nerves, or about specific nerves, or arteries and blood flow. It could be about emotions. It could be about the cranial bones, and on and on and on. And all of these things can be relevant. You know, I'm not discounting the potential relevance of these factors. But what often happens is that the therapist will get attached to one of these or a handful of these specific modalities, and for various reasons they'll gravitate towards specific modalities, and they'll find something that resonates with their worldview, or that helps them with their own issues, that confirms their own biases, and they'll buy into this perspective, and they'll sort of figuratively plant their flag in that camp. And I'll use myself as an example. This is many years ago, but a major part of my own pain and overcoming my pain was addressing the way my feet moved, the biomechanics of my feet. And so I studied anatomy in motion, which is a whole body view of biomechanics based around the movement of the feet and how they ripple throughout the body. And it's a tremendous, tremendous modality and tremendous thought process. It's an excellent modality, but it's one piece of the puzzle. And for me, I got such benefit in my own pain from studying that when I approached treatments, I had that bias, and I was always looking for what was going on in the foot and how that was relevant. And I was finding things, like there was always stuff there to find, but it wasn't always relevant. But my own bias at that time was driving me to think that it was really, really relevant. And to sort of get to the point I'm trying to make, I'm going to use a ruler as a visual aid and as an analogy. And this may be clearer if you're watching on YouTube, but I'll try to make it clear for those who can only listen to the podcast. So I want you to visualize a ruler that's held upright. And so on the bottom end of the ruler is the 0, and you can think of that as being the origin of your pain. And so roughly speaking, it's the root cause or root causes of your pain. Then at the opposite end, at the top end of the ruler, is where you find yourself now. It's the pain that you're currently in. So hypothetically, let's suppose you have back pain. Treatment at this top level of the ruler can be thought of as very surface level. You know, this is your standard medical treatment of x-rays. You go to your doctor, send you for an x-ray, give you painkillers and rest, and maybe if they're a bit overzealous, they'll send you in for a surgery. which hopefully doesn't happen, but happens a surprising amount of times. And this is a kind of narrow treatment that doesn't really consider for a second that there may be larger forces at play that are influencing your pain. Now, just below this is where your sort of average everyday physio is looking for tight muscles to release in the area of pain. And the thinking here is that you're in pain because the muscles in your low back are tight. So we're just going to release those muscles and everything will be resolved. Now, thankfully, we're beginning to shame and educate therapists that insist on working at this level while ignoring any deeper influences, because it's a ridiculous notion, because your brain, if it is creating muscle tension and bracing in an area, it's doing that for some sort of good reason, and simply stripping that away and removing what would be a sort of crutch to support the area is foolish, because your body is just going to recreate that compensation or another compensation. So you're not treating the deep cause, the reason for which your brain feels there is a need to create tension. Now, a bit deeper than this is where you'll find a lot of therapists nowadays, and they understand that pain is multifactorial. But I would argue that in a lot of ways they're still stuck, because rather than looking deeper for the true root cause, they're actually looking wider. And so I'm going to use, this looks like a Christian cross. Before I talked about how there are tons and tons of different modalities that all claim to have the key or to have the missing piece of the puzzle. And some will claim it's the foot, so others claim it's the cranial bones, or it's the pelvis, or it's emotions, and on, insert, fill in the blank. And like I said, all of these can be true depending on the individual. They're all worth considering. All of these factors are worth considering, but they're not really deepening the investigation. They're simply looking for various ways in which the body is connected. So they are broadening that investigation roughly, rather than deepening and finding a deeper root cause. So as an example, if you had back pain, a therapist at this sort of wider level may be looking for a connection to another part of your body. So perhaps it's the way your foot moves, perhaps it's your lack of hip mobility, perhaps it's your inability to breathe, perhaps it's a knock-on effect of an old concussion, and the list of possibilities is endless. It's absolutely endless. But I think a better question is, what conditions has your body been living in that has allowed all of this to spiral out of control to this point? So what's been going on in your life that has meant that your foot mechanics were so bad that they created a chronic issue at your low back? What's been going on in your life that has created or sustained your inability to breathe properly to the point that your back is in chronic pain? And now let's suppose that the therapist does their job. They treat your foot, so they find an issue with the foot, and it's perfectly reasonable that a therapist would find a legitimate connection between the way your foot moves and the pain in your low back. I won't discount that. I find that regularly, and it's a legitimate form of treatment. Or suppose the therapist restores your breathing, and pretty much every single case of back pain I deal with has some sort of breathing disorder. So let's suppose, that's all legitimate. Let's suppose the therapist does all that. They treat all that. Brilliant. They're doing their job. But what is being done to address the environment and other influences that made you susceptible to this problem in the first place? So again, to use the same example, why are you breathing poorly? Is it because your body is in shock? Is your body stressed? Are you bottling up anger or traumatic emotions? And if so, why is this the case? What else is going on in your life? Are you fulfilled? Are you happy? Do you enjoy your life? Are you supported? Do you have a support network, family, friends, work colleagues? If not, why not? Are you overwhelmed? If so, why are you overwhelmed? And as you start to dig into these kinds of questions, you begin to identify factors relating to your personality, relating to your habits, your beliefs, and your environment that shape your life. And an example I used in the last episode is that perhaps your breathing is restricted and your body is tense because you struggle to stand up for yourself at work and you struggle to voice your opinion. So instead, you bottle up your frustration. Now, if we're to look deeper, you may ask yourself where your lack of assertiveness or where your lack of belief in yourself comes from. Where are these traits rooted in your past experiences? Now, this, I hope, clearly illustrates where we need to start shifting our attention. So, again, back to this ruler analogy, we need to go way deep down into what creates the genesis, we'll say, of these issues. And I think we need to inform people of this level of detail. And as therapists, we need to be attentive to signs of deeper influences. Now, I also want to be clear that if you do find some deeper cause to your problem, it's not automatically necessary to confront and overcome it. You know, you don't have to get into, your relationship with your mother and all these psychotherapeutic Freudian things. Most people get better without ever going this far. But I'm personally interested in empowering people and helping them understand themselves. As I believe, and I won't be the only one to believe this, that it's through understanding and working on ourselves that we can make the world a better place, by overcoming and letting go all of our unnecessary baggage. And by doing all of this, humanity can grow without repeating the problems of the past, without passing on that baggage so that it just keeps disrupting things for generations to come. And I'd like to share a personal insight that I was talking to my mother about the other day. I can't really remember how we got onto the topic, but we ended up talking about a lot of the dysfunction in the family that had occurred in the past. And I won't say anything specific to protect the identity of these people, while also presuming that everyone else's families are so dysfunctional that this all sounds fairly common and that I'm not giving anything too crazy away. But anyway, we talked about the actions of great-grandparents and their influences across generations. And what became apparent was that while there was dysfunction and varying levels of trauma in each generation, the overall trend was that less and less trauma was being inflicted. And I don't like to think of myself as, as having been significantly traumatized, but I have accumulated my fair share of emotional baggage and unhelpful family, quote, stuff. I've accumulated enough of that I've had to do a fair share of introspection and personal development. However, I was able to start this at a younger age than my parents, and they were able to start this at a younger age than their own parents, and so on. So my thinking is that we should strive towards making sure that the next generation doesn't have to undo all of the same baggage as us. So perhaps they'll have some baggage, perhaps my children will have some baggage. I mean, realistically, life can be challenging, nothing's perfect, so they will have baggage, but it will, I intend for it to be largely inconsequential. But my point is, they won't be working to undo this baggage at the age of 30 or 50 or 60. If they have stuff, they'll have dealt with that at a younger age, or they just won't have that stuff to begin with. Now, what became apparent, which was interesting, was that, again, from reflecting on part of my family history, was how far into the future, how wide-reaching certain traits and actions could ripple. So how one tendency or one personality trait of a great-grandparent, could influence their great-grandchildren, because none of that was ever really addressed or looked at or dealt with. But the reassuring thing was also how much could change in such a short space of time by simply reflecting on the issue and confronting it. So, what does all of this have to do with pain? Let me try to bring this all together into a picture that hopefully makes a bit of sense. So at the start, I mentioned that the ultimate goal of treating pain boils down to making the world a better place. It's about taking suffering away so that people can be happy and they can pursue the lives that they want to pursue. Now, further to this, in recent years, I've been more and more interested in the practical aspects of improving myself with the aim of making the world a better place. And I figure that working to make the world a better place should be a common goal. And I think it is a common goal, but I don't really know how much people think about this kind of thing. So I can only really speak for myself. But I imagine it probably seems to a lot of people a bit pointless, and it seems too big of a task for a single person to concern themselves with. What can I do about the greater problems in the world? I'm only this small person. That should be left to governments and charities and philanthropists who have tons of money. But as far as I can tell, the real way to change the world, the way that actually works, is about changing your immediate world. Making the world that you live in a better place. So your family, your friends, and your immediate circle of influence. That's who you want to influence. That's what you can change. And I think it's absolutely possible to create change at that level and for that to ripple out to the world. And most importantly, if everyone does this, or if only some, or if simply more and more people start thinking this way, this continues to ripple and to snowball to the wider world. So all of these ideas have been, they've been occupying my mind recently, and I'm trying to work towards something greater. Because I'm not satisfied with the narrow confines of what a physical therapist is, or what they should be, or what's expected of a physical therapist. I find that just a bit too limiting from the point of view of treating pain, and also I feel like we should be treating pain for a greater purpose, like I said, to make the world a better place. So, with all of this in mind, what is the best application of a therapist's skills? I believe it's towards shining a light on the wider influences in one's life that perpetuate and create an environment for pain to thrive in. So to make the world a better place by making people better, by helping people to overcome their own baggage and their own stuff so that their lives ripple positively to a wider world, so that their children live with less baggage, and so that they're better able to make the world a better place, and so on and so forth. As I've said a few times, I'm at the very beginning of this process of learning, and I'm still figuring out, how to verbalize these ideas and how exactly they fit into my world of treating pain. So I would love to hear your thoughts and to know whether any of this actually makes sense, because I imagine some people will see what I'm saying or hear what I'm saying as complete waffle and nonsense. And if that's the case, I'd love to know. I would love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your feedback and constructive criticisms so that I can figure out a better way of making my point, because I think it's a very important point to make. Now, the goal for this episode is largely to provide some food for thought. So to encourage you to look more broadly at your life and your environment, to look deeper and to ask those tougher questions about what is going on in your life and how these things may be influencing your life. So questions like, am I happy? Excuse me. Am I fulfilled? What is my purpose in life? Am I pursuing something of purpose? Am I nurturing meaningful relationships? Am I living the life I want to live? Or am I living the life that someone else wants me to live, which is, a very common thing. And I want to encourage you to entertain the idea that your progress with your health and your pain may be impaired by the constraints of the society you live in and the baggage that you've accumulated over a lifetime. But anyway, if you've listened this far, thank you very much. Thank you truly and deeply. I hope this has given you some valuable food for thought, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts and your criticisms. Because like I said, a lot of this it's just what's going on in my head, and until I write it down, it maybe doesn't really make any sense, and it's through the process of writing it down and then maybe getting feedback that I can consolidate these ideas. And that's why I like writing therapy and questioning yourself and writing about your beliefs and exploring things, because it's a really nice way of understanding yourself and really making sure that what you believe and what you think is true. Does it really hold up? So I would really appreciate your help in that personal process for me, and I hope that you engage in this process for yourself. And I would highly encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions and if you want to bounce any ideas. So I'll wrap up there. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Physical Education Podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with someone in need. If you found value in the information here, they will too. So please share this in whatever way you can. If you have any questions, you can email me directly at pa@thebackpaincoach.net. I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. If you'd like more information to help you overcome pain, be sure to follow The Back Pain Coach on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube, and to join my newsletter. The major turning points in my own recovery have come from changes in perception and through learning more about myself. I believe that we can help others by sharing information that expands their minds. Finally, I'd greatly appreciate if you could leave a positive review on iTunes or Stitcher so that others may find this information and you can play a positive role in their healing journey. Thanks again for listening.